So this is one of those moments where you want your mother to call and say, unfortunately, the kid is ill and cannot do that. I think to make me talk after Hillary is really cruel and there is no other word for it. But I'm really thankful for that performance because somehow it connects with some of the ideas that I want to express in my own. And yeah, the other thing is that I would also pay all of you to be able to talk in Spanish tonight because I'm so tired that after that, I think I'm following him. And then, of course, the English thing, it's like I'm very confused. But still, so I'm going to be short, which is a good news. These are really good news. So, these are flower, and this flower make me tired. They make tired in a really good way, but it make me really tired because I've been working on that flower with a person for a year, and that flower bloomed like last week to 10 days ago, and it bloomed for 20 minutes, and then it was done. But then for a year, you need to imagine that we have been creating attention around the idea of becoming a flower. So this person, Ingela Irman, an artist, proposed to me to become a flower and to do a dress, to become a flower, to be inside the flower, to perform the flower, to be the flower, and to come to Basel and to open up in front of the audience for the time that it needs to perform and be open up. So I was not thinking about anything else. I was just following her path of just trying to become a flower. This was not the first time that I was working with an artist that wanted to become something else or wanted to become a plant. So before, I've been working with Eduardo Navarro, who wanted to become an octopus 1 year ago and did become an octopus, and then before wanted to become a turtle, and he did become a turtle, and then before he wanted to become a horse, and he did become a horse. So I was not surprised when an artist, Ingela Irman, told me that she wanted to become a flower. It was also not the first time because she did become a flower before. So I was following that, thinking that it's going to be a little bit immense because becoming a flower is something that is bigger than becoming or doing an exhibition, presenting any artwork in an art space that's anyhow small and it's not even an art space and it's located in the campus of a university. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, it's also difficult not to be a little bit in tension if somebody says that wants to become a flower and do a dress to become a flower. So that it may become not a flower and become a proxy of a flower, become somebody dressed in a dress of a flower, looking like something else than the flower. So if you want to become a flower, it's a big thing. It's called transubstanciación in the Catholic Spanish language. And I cannot say the word in English at all, but I think that you know what I'm talking about. So you know the thing with the hostia and the Christ and the blood and the calyx and all that. So there is a moment of that metamorphosis already in culture. So, and this metamorphosis creates attention. So I did not think about anything else. And then when I was invited to come here, I thought like, what is this flower? And I could explain it as a performance, but of course it's not. It's not a performance to just become a flower. It's something else. And then I was starting again reading a book that I had on my desk, and I read it once, and I thought it was absolutely not telling to me, which is Goethe. So Goethe, in 1786, he left Weimar and left also his fame of being the author of Werther and went to Italy. And that trip to Italy changed his life. And then you would think that it changed the life of Goethe because going to Italy exposed him to the classical culture and to a different climate. He was German, he was living in Weimar. And, but the most interesting thing of this change of life is that Goethe that discovered something that he would express in a book that was published in 1790 called The Metamorphosis of the Plants. And then in that book, the book starts with a fantastic sentence, and it says, all is leaf. So from there on, he describes page after page after page after page how a plant becomes a plant, how a plant becomes a leaf, how a leaf kind of makes itself different from the raw material of the plant, and every leaf is something different, which is the plant and is not the plant. And in that kind of dialectic of becoming, in that kind of movement, the plant becomes a plant, and he sees in that some sort of a metamorphic miracle that is both addressing the totality but challenging it by all these parts changing in different rhythms versus the total. So the interesting thing of that book that is quite difficult to read, and it's actually kind of fascinating and boring at the same time because it provides only these descriptions of his discovery of the leaf, of the leaf leaving the plant, the leaf becoming the plant, the leaf moving inside the plant, the leaf not being exactly the plant, the leaf not being the raw material of the plant, and so on and so forth, pages after pages. But then 8 years later, 1798, he did exactly the same. So he took the book again, The Metamorphosis of the Plants, and did a poem with it. So he did a poem called The Metamorphosis of the Plants. And in that poem, he just expresses exactly the same ideas, but in classical poetry. And it's an incredible poem. It's really an incredible poem because somehow it says what I just said, the idea of the plant possessing in itself the capability of becoming all the time in a rhythm and becoming and becoming and becoming and being there. And then also he merges something that we could call science with something that you could call poetry. So I have no idea why I'm so fascinated by that text, but I am. So almost 100 years later, in 1872, Nietzsche, that was very interested in music, started to do a series of lectures that he never published, which is an inquiry into rhythm. And starts publishing, starts talking, not publishing, because they have never been published. Start talking about the importance of thinking, of the importance of rhythm, and how rhythm is actually life, because its life is becoming. The most important element of life is understanding rhythm, and that rhythm is expressed in many forms, and one of the forms are the plants, and the other forms are the music. And then he makes an impressive theory about the importance of understanding rhythm as in the same way that Goethe was trying to understand metamorphosis, not as an image, not as a metaphor, not as a view, but some sort of a mental image that then had an impressive symmetry with a bodily one. So as a method, as a thinking method, as an epistemology, if you want. But not only, because it was not about understanding how knowledge works, but how knowledge acts. The idea that knowledge in itself is metamorphosis, and that both are equal. And then in order to understand what metamorphosis is, in order to understand transformation, you need to understand rhythm. But it's very difficult to understand rhythm because rhythm has not had the same logic as images. It's not appealing to the eyes, appealing to the ears, but it's not only appealing to the ears, it's really appealing to the skin. And it's appealing to the liquids, appealing to the body in a complete different form than other things. So metamorphosis as a method, as the act of thinking, implies exactly the possibility of transformation, and transformation being a complete different thing from change. So one thing is change, and one thing is metamorphosis or transformation, and they are not equal. And what marks the inequality of these two terms is rhythm and its complexity, and the fact that you need the five senses to actually perceive that life is transforming itself into more life, or into death than being life. So some years later, like another 100 years later, Pinheiro, that was a very unknown Brazilian philosopher, 1931, published a book that nobody read but one person probably, called Gaston Bachelard. That book is called Rhythm Analysis. And in that book, he says that the same as Nietzsche, if you don't understand rhythm, you are not going to understand life. And in order to actually produce some sort of life, you need to mimic. And in order to mimic, you need the rhythm. Because if you don't have the rhythm, you are going to be unable to follow life, to understand life, not producing an image from the study of life, like an anthropologist, or like a scientist, or like an artist, or like a camera, or like a computer, or like any other device. But the idea is to actually produce images from the inside. But those that you call images from the inside are really not images. They are just rhythms. But you call it images because that's how you see. You see through the brain, through the eye, and then you think that you are seeing, but you are not seeing, you are sensing. And the way that you are sensing, you call it rhythm. And rhythm is complex, and rhythm is actually challenging you because it's what makes exactly what Goethe was describing. It's kind of just breaking the leaf from the raw material all the time and again, and it's actually symbiotizing the light and the energy and so on and so forth. But it's not only photosynthesis, is that metamorphosis of the plant. All is leaf, as Goethe was saying. And Bachelard was saying, but this is amazing, because if this is true, then in rhythm, we have a new idea of time. Actually, the only notion that we can rely to express quantum time would be rhythm, because in biological time we have an immense tendency to actually situate things in a before and in an after. And actually, it was before Gaston Bachelard that many theories were saying that rhythm is something that the humans possess, but this rhythm that the humans possess, that the living organs are possessing, is a different rhythm than the rhythm of the machines or the rhythms of the inorganic material. Like Bergson was saying that. And Bachelard is saying, definitely not. There is no other possibility to understand how we live in a time that is not a timeline, that is not living off time but in time, is this kind of a rhythm. And then we need to understand rhythm and then put it equally with metamorphosis, then put it equally with quantum, with the idea that there is an immense synchronicity that produces a sense of mimetic power that makes you actually feel and understand life, not from an external point of view, but from an internal point of view. And that internal point of view is actually very difficult to describe because we are trained to just see it from outside all the time. Everything is in a definition of externality. So how can we go in if we are out? Or even our senses. I think we are not inside something. So I was just thinking, and that's why I put the flower here, that I put the flower here because it's actually some sort of a method. And that in kind of becoming the plant, becoming a turtle, becoming a cloud like Federico Peralta Ramos, becoming an egg, becoming weather, like many artists in Latin America were proposing in the 60s during the dictatorship in Argentina. They wanted to become a weather, to become a cloud, to become the rain, to become the water. And it was not only a metaphorical thinking, it was not even poetry, but yes, it does something to do with poetry and with metaphorical thinking. But it's not, it's really not equal to that. And then this new wave of artists proposing to be in touch with nature. What are they doing? And a possible answer is that they studying. They studying, and what the mental image that we like when we like artists in the nearness of nature, in the nearness or inside the water of the ocean, is because we like the mental image of artists kind of rehearsing another type of research that is not quite scientific, and then it goes to this kind of poetic metaphorical thing. But if you say no, this is really not interesting, I think the mental image of us seeing ourselves studying is actually powerful, but not powerful enough to make actually this kind of connection. Or if this kind of connection needs to be done like Goethe, if you need to really connect with the plant in such a way that everything is a leaf or all is leaf, if this is true, then the reason why you are putting artists in nature is really not to rehearse or to make them actually render the dry research of academy in another way, in another poetic, in another dramaturgy. There must be some other reason. And you probably will put them there because we need actually the poetry, we need actually the thousands of poems that they have been written on the flowers on earth, on the trees on earth, on the birds on earth, on the mountains on earth. We need exactly the same amount of poetical material from under the water, from under the ocean. And we put in the artists there because we need that material, because it is in this material that we understand exactly what Goethe and Bachelard and Nietzsche and many others are trying to express. Life is becoming, life is rhythm, and there is some sort of quantum tactics like that make us understand life and a point of view that totally surpasses traditional ideas of aesthetics. But then what are the politics of that? I think, are we actually only interested in expanding the notions, the senses, the way we are feeling, the way we are seeing, the way we are actually narrating, and all of that? Or there is also some sort of politics, as in traditional politics. And I was thinking that in becoming the flower, what this woman was doing, apart from providing one of the most beautiful experience I had in the last years, many years, and it was very tilting and really very moving, was actually putting forward a very banal but very beautiful idea that metamorphosis is based on complete internality. And this complete internality defies completely a very modernistic and a very utilitarian idea of the territory and the idea of expansion. So if you have some sort of modern notion of the territory, of the nation, of something that you could conquer, or some sort of colonialism in you, in our culture, in the way we are thinking, the only way to defy it, the only way to reset the whole system of thinking and feeling, which then stops to be territorial, that stops to be kind of national oriented, would be actually to be metamorphic and to learn what this means in politics when you don't need anything external and when the things are kind of encompassed in themselves. So the kind of most anti-colonial and expansionist notion would be that expressed in ways like this flower. And that's what I was about to say tonight. Thank you so much.